I didn't know that talking about Sam Gamgee was gonna make me cry. Hello, welcome to this video. Welcome to my channel. Today we are doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I don't know how much actual freaking out I will be doing in this video. My main freakout is that I wish I had read more this year. And so I plan to read more in the second half of this year, but since it's nearing the end of June, I wanted to stay true to the mid-year and post this as close to the halfway point of the year as I could get. So for Christmas 2019, my mom gave me this tiny little notebook in which I have been recording my reading in 2020. I think I've missed a couple of things. Like one of the books I was going to talk about in this video, I looked back to see what I rated it in this little notebook, and it was nowhere to be found. But according to this little notebook paired with my memory, this year I have read 24 books, 4 short stories, and 1 play. That is also not taking into account the things that I read for school that I chose not to mark down in here, like textbooks or novels or short stories or articles that were not necessarily remarkable to my reading life. Aside from my assigned school readings, like all of the psychology textbooks that I read cover to cover, I've managed to read 24 books this year, which actually, you know, with all of the craziness that's been going on and being a more than full-time college student and working at school, I feel like is pretty good for me. So if everyone's ready, let's just get into the questions for this mid-year book freakout tag. The first question is, what is the best book you read in 2020? And for me, the answer is Silence by Shusaku Endo. This is a book that we read in my World Civ 2 class, which is just a gen ed class, but we talked a lot in that class about the Japanese Christian century and the Christian oppression thereafter in Japan, and so this was the novel that my professor chose to illuminate that point of history. I believe in either 2014 or 2016, I'll put it on the screen here when I look it up, this was a major motion picture created and directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver. And I think it won a lot of awards. I haven't watched the movie. We didn't have a chance to watch the movie in class. We just watched a couple of crucial scenes to sort of help us envision what's going on in the book. This takes place in 17th century Japan. This takes place in 17th century Japan when 2 Portuguese Jesuit priests learn that the father who has brought them up in the faith, who mentored them through their ordination, there is talk that he has renounced the faith during his time in Japan because of the oppression of Christians there, and they don't believe it, so they go to Japan to learn what actually happened to him. And it deals with themes like the silence of God when you need him to be speaking, which is where the title comes from. That's the main theme, and what the silence of God really actually means. I really want to get into more of Endo's works. This book was completely incredible, and it is one of the things that has sort of been gearing my reading towards a new path. This book is incredibly sad and heartbreaking, and it'll come up again in a certain question later on. This book is sad and heartbreaking and completely incredible to read. I almost don't have words to describe it other than cliche adjectives. I really recommend this book if the premise sounds interesting to you. It is about, like I said, the silence of God and what causes people's faith to deconstruct. It also deals with whether or not what looks like a deconstruction is really a deconstruction of faith. It also deals with whether you're going to save your life or save face with the religious leaders of your faith. So anyway, I could probably ramble and say nothing forever about this book. Okay, yeah, I rated this 5 stars. Obviously the best book of 2020, so good that I don't really even know how to talk about it. So the next question is the best sequel of 2020. There are a couple different schools of thought on what constitutes a sequel. I've seen a lot of people just say like sequel is only the second book in a series, but I'm gonna go with any book in a series that comes after the first book is the sequel, because by far I think the best sequel I read this year was The Toll by Neil Shusterman. I read Scythe and Thunderhead last summer sequentially, and as soon as this came out, it was in my school mailbox. I was reading it and I was loving it. I just thought that this trilogy was just perfection. I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say that Neil Shusterman destroys his world in this book because that's what had to happen, and I really liked the way he did it. Everything about this was incredible to me. The romance is still really weak just throughout the books, but this ended up being not romance focused at all, which was fortunate, because if the romance had taken like a bigger part in this book, it probably would not have been nearly as good as it was. So I'm not going to tell you what happens or what the premise of this book is because it's major spoilers, but if you have not read the Arc of a Scythe series, I completely recommend it. I'm sure that you know what it's about, and if you've read the first book or the first and the second book, please continue. I am planning on rereading this series at some point in the future. I don't know what point that is, but I loved this book. Something else that I'm going to be talking about a lot in this video is the fact that I read the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the first time this year. I had never had any exposure to the Lord of the Rings before I bought these books and sat down to read them. So I also want to say best sequels of 2020 are these two books. I get the hype around Lord of the Rings. I get it. So the new release that I haven't gotten to yet, which actually just came out, is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I have been wanting to get into N.K. Jemisin, but I wasn't exactly sure which of her series interested me the most, and I wanted to start with the one that interested me the most. And then The City We Became came out, and I am a huge fan of New York City. I have visited there twice, and I would love to live there someday, or just live there for a period of time. I have yet to buy very many new books recently, and so as soon as I decide to do that, I'm going to read The City We Became because it just sounds incredible. The fourth question is the most anticipated release of the second half of the year. So the thing about this is that I don't know how to keep track of that. So if anyone has any tips for keeping track of new releases, please leave it in the comments because I would love to know. These books are actually from Ashley's video at A Frolic Through Fiction, where she talks about the second half of the year releases that she is excited about. So that's where these came from. The first one is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, which comes out September 29th of this year. It is about a magical school, I believe, where there are no professors. But like, if you stay alive for your entire 4 years or however long the education is, you graduate. I believe the school is like packed with monsters, and that just sounds like the perfect inversion of one of my favorite tropes, which is magic schools. So I love that. That sounds amazing. The second book I'm excited about is The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow, which comes out October 15th of this year. This is, I'm not exactly sure what the premise is, but it is the emerging of the Salem witch trials and women's suffrage, which sounds like the perfect pairing. I don't remember what the premise is, like I said, but just like those two things put together, that's really stuck with me, and I'm going to be reading that book. So the next question is really sad, and if you've watched my last few videos, I'm sure you can guess what I'm going to say my biggest disappointment of 2020 was. I promise you that I am part of the dark academia situation, but I did not like this book. I loved it until the murder. I thought the writing was really cool. It reminded me of a hybrid between The Great Gatsby and Catcher in the Rye. Add college and you've got The Secret History. But there were just some things in the second half of the book when the descent into madness starts, and the unraveling of all of the characters' personas starts, that were just unnecessary. They didn't have to be in there to make a good book. I feel like maybe if I were expecting those reveals in the second half of the book, that maybe I would like it better because I could try to look past it. But honestly, like, if you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. That stuff is not necessary. So anyway, all that to say, those are a lot of thoughts surrounding why The Secret History was a big disappointment, because I was so excited and I wanted to love it so much, but there are just some things that I can't get over, especially when they're not dealt with. I felt like if Donna Tartt was going to include those things, she should have dealt with them as an author in a different way, in a way that shows that those things are not okay. First half of this book, like 3.5, 4, maybe 4.5 or 5 stars, but then the second half just tanked it and I was really disappointed. The next question in this tag is, what is your biggest surprise of the year? I thought it might be interesting to do both a negative surprise and a positive surprise. So my negative surprise of 2020 was The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. The Handmaid's Tale is one of my favorite books of all time, and I didn't read any reviews for this before I read it, and so I was really surprised to find that this was not at all what I was expecting. I knew that Margaret Atwood was going to deconstruct and take down Gilead in a revolution in this book, but I just didn't feel like it was anywhere near interesting. I do think that The Handmaid's Tale has an element of novelty and shock that makes it a really, really good book. And so because this is an addition to the world, this doesn't have that same novelty and shock, and so it suffered in that way just by its nature. This really gets into the guts of Gilead as a government and the inner workings of it, and how it's taken down from the inside, which I am a firm believer that The Handmaid's Tale as a novel is a necessary read for everyone, especially for American citizens, and I would say that this is not at all necessary. This is like extra articles that you could read if you wanted to enrich your understanding of a class on a syllabus. I thought this book probably could have been cut into a third if it was told only from Aunt Lydia's perspective, who was really the only interesting character who narrated in this book. It was an interesting article to add to my understanding of The Handmaid's Tale, but I don't consider this necessarily canon. Since I read The Handmaid's Tale, I have imagined for myself how Gilead would be taken down, and I think this is just Margaret Atwood's idea. Whereas someone else, everyone who reads The Handmaid's Tale might have a different idea of how that may happen. I didn't hate it, but it was just okay, and it sort of surprised me that the contents of this book were what they were, so that's why I called it my biggest negative surprise. The biggest positive surprise of the year for me was none other than the legendary Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I listened to this on audiobook, and for one, the narrator on Scribd was absolutely incredible. For another thing, you know, I should have trusted Cat from Paperback Dreams when she was just screaming about it. I usually don't read contemporary young adult fiction, and I also went into this having no idea what it was about really at all, and I was blown away. This story struck so many chords within me, and I loved it so much. Even if you don't like contemporary YA fantasy, especially if you have gifted kid syndrome, or you are a high school student or a college student, or anyone, just read this book. It shines such a light on productivity culture and the expectations of academic performance on every single child. That was the most meaningful part to me. And I just think that each and every single part of this book was well done. I could talk for ages and ages about Radio Silence, but that was my biggest good surprise. My favorite new author, which is actually not a debut author, but a new to me author, is J.R.R. Tolkien. What can I say? I read The Hobbit twice in high school, once because it was summer reading required, and a second time because I hated it the first time and I wanted to see what the hype was about. And I didn't like it very much the second time either, but I had some friends in college who were obsessed. All of my friends in college, from college, are obsessed with The Lord of the Rings, and so I just wanted to give the whole series a shot, and I'm so glad I did. This world is one of the most incredible that I have gotten the pleasure to live in and read in and walk around in and observe. I love observing, and I love when writers write like Tolkien does. They write as an observer of the world that they've created, and they leave out no detail, and I love that. So the next question is a new fictional crush. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this question. For one thing, like Alad Last and also Francis, both of them, incredible. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this question, but Mr. Knightley from Emma. If you watched my booktube newbie tag, I said that I feel like Emma is a story that's written about my life, and so it makes sense that I would love Mr. Knightley, but he's a good one. I like him a lot. He's really cool. The next question is your newest favorite character, and for this I'm going to choose Sam Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings. What can I say about Sam? Sam Gamgee is the most wholesome, most loyal friend in any book series I have ever read. He is the reason why Frodo makes it to the end, I'll just say. And I can't imagine a series without him. When we talk about books that make you cry later, I'm thinking about the end of this book and Sam just wanting to go home and how this book ends, and it is everything that he deserves. Wow, okay. I didn't know that talking about Sam Gamgee was gonna make me cry. Sam is just, he's just the tops. He is the bee's knees. He's the cat's pajamas. Sam Gamgee is incredible. So actually the next question is books that made you cry, and for that it's The Return of the King and Silence. The endings of both of these books made the tears come. Sam got the ending that he deserved, and the climax of this book tore my heart apart. We're nearing the end. The next question is books that made you happy. I have a couple for this actually. Can you guess what I'm gonna mention first? The Lord of the Rings. I won't say anymore. So happy. So happy. Happiness incarnate. The next book I'm gonna talk about is Emma by Jane Austen. Every single one of the characters, even the characters that are supposed to be annoying, are such amazing characters that add so much to the story. I loved everything about this book. I loved everything that happened in this book, and the ending is just perfection. And the third book for this question, books that made me happy, is actually Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. I read this for the first time, and up until this point, my uncontested Agatha Christie favorite was Murder on the Orient Express, but this one blew me away. I mean, Murder on the Orient Express is obviously the Agatha Christie book. I love mysteries where the clues are so convoluted that you work with the same handful of clues for the whole book trying to figure out how they fit together. Murder on the Orient Express is that way, and Death on the Nile is that way. I also love the trope where someone is about to tell the investigator who killed the person, and then they get killed in the process. And that trope is in this book too. If you've never read Agatha Christie before, I would recommend this book wholeheartedly. If you have read Agatha Christie before and you haven't read Death on the Nile, I would recommend this book wholeheartedly. It is so well crafted, so convoluted, so incredible, and Hercule Poirot is one of my favorite characters of all time. The next question is, what is the most beautiful book you have bought or received this year? And I have two answers for this. The first is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. This is my sort of classically beautiful, like you have to recognize that this is gorgeous kind of book. I mean, the mint green and the red hair and Cortana here and the gold dress and the gate in the back, it's just incredible. The spine is beautiful, and this is the collector's first edition, and so it has this beautiful piece of art on the inside as well, which actually enriched my reading experience quite a lot when I read this book. Next answer to this question of the most beautiful book that you bought this year is this collection of Percy Bysshe Shelley's poems. I say this is my most beautiful book because this one most aesthetically pleases me. I love the shade of blue that they chose. I love the white against it. I love the art. I love how simple and stark the art looks against the blue, and how you just have to keep looking and you find more and more little details within the art. So the final question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? I'm going to make a video at the end of the summer that is going to illuminate this question a little bit more, where I'm going to talk about the books that I want to read before I graduate college. The first 3 books I have to answer this question are these 2 physical books that I'm reading right now. I'm smack in the middle of both of these, so There's no reason why I shouldn't finish these by December. And I'm also currently reading Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi. Hopefully I can also finish that by December. The next book to answer this question is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I know that I hated The Secret History, but I want to give The Goldfinch a shot. My best friend read this while I was reading The Secret History, and we were going to read these two different Donna Tartt books and then swap, but I hated The Secret History so much that she decided not to read it, but she finished this and she said that I would really like it. So I'm trusting her, and I'm putting my 800-page life in her hands. I also want to read A Little Life by the end of the year by Hanya Yanagihara. I just want to experience this experience. That's all I have to say. And then the final book that I have to read by the end of the year is this Charles Dickens Christmas Stories. It is the full collection of Charles Dickens' 5 Christmas stories, including an introduction. This is such a gem. I found this at the secondhand bookstore and it's in perfect condition. But I plan to read this in December, either when I get home for Christmas break or when December starts, so that I can get in the Christmas spirit and further my Charles Dickens reading experience. So that was my mid-year book freakout tag. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you leave a comment about anything that I had to say in this video, any thoughts that you have on the books that I read. Please leave me a comment and let me know. I'll leave the questions in the description. If you have a mid-year book freakout tag, please link it in the description, or if you just want to answer the questions in a comment, I would love to read it and talk to you about any of these books or any of the books that you have read this year. So thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I hope you are having a great day, and if you're not, I hope it gets better soon, and I hope you love what you're reading. Bye!